land stretched wide and empty, a quilt of dust and wind beneath a sky bruised with evening clouds. Elias Boone leaned on his fence post, his knuckles raw, his breath slow and heavy like an old clock winding down. The horizon burned gold where the sun sank, throwing its last light across the brittle stalks of dying grass. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a man hear the ache in his own bones. He'd worked this patch of earth for 30 years, built the cabin, dug the well, buried his wife behind the cottonwoods when fever took her. Now it was just him and the wind and the whisper of the well bucket creaking in the distance. A hawk cut across the sky, its shadow gliding over the corral where his mule stood half asleep. Elias lifted his head at the faint tremor underfoot, hooves far off but coming fast. His jaw tightened. Travelers were rare this far out from Red Hollow, and the ones who came uninvited usually carried bad news or worse intentions. He wiped his hands on his trousers, reached inside the cabin, and rested his fingers on the cold barrel of the rifle hanging over the hearth. 5 riders emerged from the dust like ghosts, their outlines sharpening as they neared the gate. The lead horse was black and restless, its rider tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shaded half his face. Elias knew that posture, that swagger, the Crowder brothers. Wade Crowder and his pack of dogs. Trouble on horseback. "Evening, Boone," Wade called, his voice carrying smooth and false across the yard. "Fine evening to settle a bit of business, wouldn't you say?" Elias didn't answer right away. He let his hand drift away from the rifle. "I told you men before," he said, steady but tired. "There's no gold on this land, and the water you're after belongs to no one. It runs free beneath all of us." The men laughed. One spat into the dirt. Wade dismounted, boots hitting the ground with the lazy confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "You expect me to believe that, old man? Funny thing, how your land keeps green while ours turns to dust. You guarding something under that well?" Elias shook his head. "Only water and prayer." "Prayer don't fill a canteen," Wade said. He circled the farmer slowly, the others fanning out, their eyes restless, greedy. "They say your boy found gold up in Bitter Ridge before the law ran him off. They say he buried some of it here. Maybe left you a little fortune to rot under your feet." Elias met his gaze. "You leave my son out of your poison." Wade smiled thinly, the kind of smile that didn't touch the eyes. "Your son, the giant? Folks still whisper about him. Said he could lift a horse clean off the ground. Shame he ain't here to protect you." The air thickened. Elias could feel the old ache in his shoulder, where an earlier fight had left bone against bone. He'd been expecting something like this for months. Men who thought might was right. That decency was weakness. He straightened, thin but unbroken. "You can take the well if it'll quiet your ghosts," he said. "But you'll find no gold here. Just me." That was all it took. The kind of words that scratched pride raw. Wade's face darkened. He moved fast, grabbing Elias by the collar and driving a fist into his ribs. The farmer staggered back, but didn't fall. The others closed in, laughing, boots grinding against the earth. The first blow split his lip. The next doubled him over. He tasted iron and dust. His vision swam, but he stayed upright until a rifle butt cracked against his temple. He hit the ground hard, feeling the grit press into his cheek. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the scrape of a match. A second later, fire bloomed at his cabin window. The flames licked the sky, orange and hungry. "Look at it burn," one of the men said, his voice gleeful. Elias tried to crawl toward the house, but a boot caught him in the ribs and flipped him onto his back. Wade crouched beside him, eyes glinting with heat and hate. "You could have saved yourself some trouble, Boone. Just told me where it is." "There's nothing," Elias rasped. "You're burning ghosts." Wade leaned closer. "Then you'll join them." He stood, turned his back, and walked toward his horse as the flames spread from roof to corral. The gang mounted up, laughter cutting through the crackle of burning timber. One of them kicked the farmer's bucket down the well before they rode off, their silhouettes swallowed by smoke and twilight. Elias lay still, breathing in shallow bursts. The night air grew colder as the fire roared higher. Sparks drifted over him, like stars falling from a sky. He turned his head toward the cottonwoods, where his wife rested beneath a small wooden cross, now flickering orange from the glow. "Not yet, Mary," he whispered, voice trembling. "Not yet." He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. The pain crawled through him like fire ants. The cabin's roof collapsed with a shriek, sending a plume of sparks into the night. He closed his eyes. He could hear the land sigh, the same sigh he'd heard every dry season, every storm that broke too late. And then came the silence, the kind that hums behind your heartbeat, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. Elias pressed his hand into the soil, felt its warmth from the fire fading into cold. He thought of his boy Jonas, tall as a tree, hands like shovels, eyes like his mother's. He'd been gone 10 years now, chased by law and legend. But Elias had never stopped believing he was alive somewhere, wild and unbroken. "Jonas," he murmured, blood thick in his throat. "My boy will come." The wind stirred, low and mournful. Ash settled across his face like gray snow. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long, aching, and familiar. It carried through the canyons and fields, echoing against the bones of the earth. He smiled faintly. "That's him," he breathed, though he knew it wasn't. "He hears me." The night deepened. The last beam of the cabin fell with a hiss. Sparks snuffed into darkness. Elias rolled onto his back and looked up at the stars trembling through smoke. He remembered Jonas as a boy chasing fireflies near the barn, laughing when his mother called him in. He remembered teaching him to shoot, the way his hands were too big for the rifle even at 15. He remembered the promise Jonas had made before leaving. "If anyone ever lays a hand on you, Pa, I'll come for them." Elias tried to whisper something more, but the words dissolved. His body gave in to the weight of exhaustion, his mind slipping into the gray space between waking and gone. The flames hissed down to embers, painting the ruins of the farm in shades of sorrow and shadow. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled, or maybe it was hooves, the kind of sound that came from deep places, where vengeance sleeps until it's called. By midnight, the wind had cooled the earth. The Crowders' laughter was long gone, swallowed by the miles between here and town. But the silence they left behind didn't feel empty. It felt watchful, waiting. A lone figure of a man lay broken beside what was once his home, his breath faint as the smoke thinning in the sky. Beside him, a single ember still burned, small and stubborn, glowing red against the darkness. When the dawn came, the fire was gone, but the tracks of the Crowders' horses still cut through the soil. Crows circled overhead, their wings slicing the pale morning light. And in the chill of the breeze, as the world stirred awake, something unseen moved among the pines beyond the ridge, something large, deliberate, coming down from the mountains. The snow had fallen all night, heavy as silence, burying the mountains in white that glowed faintly under a gray dawn. In the deep stillness of Bitter Ridge, smoke rose from a single cabin hidden among pines blackened by wind and age. Inside, a man moved with the quiet patience of someone who had long ago made peace with solitude. Jonas Boone sat at a rough-hewn table, a slab of pine before him, shaping a rifle stock with the precision of a craftsman and the strength of a man who'd fought both men and beasts for the right to breathe another day. He was a mountain of a man, shoulders broad enough to carry a world that had already turned its back on him. Scars traced his forearms like pale rivers, each one a memory of the years he'd spent carving a life out of wilderness that wanted him gone. His hair was long, streaked with gray despite his youth, and his beard caught bits of frost each time he stepped outside. In the hearth, the fire crackled low, reflecting off the wolf skull hanging over the mantel, a creature he'd killed with his bare hands one winter night when hunger had driven both of them to desperation. For 10 years, Jonas had lived up here beyond law and judgment, his only company the wolves that roamed the ridges and the ghost of his father's voice that sometimes rode the wind. Men below had called him many things, killer, giant, outlaw, but in these mountains, he was simply part of the silence, part of the snow and stone. He spoke little and prayed even less. The world below had no forgiveness left for men like him. That morning, he rose before the sun, carrying a trap line through the drifts. His boots sank deep, crunching in rhythm with the wind's hollow whistle. Around him, the forest watched, every branch heavy, every sound magnified. He paused by a clearing where a frozen creek wound through the trees like a vein of glass. A wolf stood on the far side, tall and lean, its fur the color of ash. It watched him with amber eyes, unafraid. Jonas nodded slightly, as if to an equal. "Morning, friend," he murmured. He'd learned something about life up here, how survival could strip a man down to his bones until what was left was either animal or something stronger. The wolves had taught him to endure, to move without waste, to trust instinct over mercy. He'd come to see himself as one of them, a creature shaped by the cold, belonging to no man and no town. By midday, he returned to his cabin with 3 hares and the weight of another winter pressing on his shoulders. He stoked the fire, hung his coat, and sat again at the table. The rifle stock before him gleamed under a thin shaft of light from the window. His hands worked slow, deliberate. He carved the image of a wolf's head into the wood, the lines flowing sharp and alive. When he finished, he brushed the shavings aside and stared at the carving for a long moment, lost in thought. Then he heard it, the distant rhythm of hooves against frozen ground. At first, he thought it was memory, a ghost sound that came with old guilt. But it grew clearer, closer. He stood, moving to the doorway, the snow blinding bright as he stepped into the light. A lone rider was approaching through the trees, bundled in a thick coat, horse steaming from the climb. Jonas waited until the rider halted a few yards away. "You're hard to find," the man said, pulling back his scarf. His face was raw from wind, his eyes dark with unease. "You Boone?" Jonas nodded once. "Depends who's a-skinned. Name's Carson. I ride for the sheriff down in Red Hollow." Jonas said nothing. He just watched, the stillness in him heavier than threat. Carson shifted uneasily, glancing toward the cabin. "I came because you ought to know. It's your pa, Elias Boone. They came to his place 2 nights ago. Crowder boys. Left him for dead." The words hit like the crack of a rifle in an empty canyon. Jonas's eyes hardened, though his face barely moved. The wind caught the edge of his coat, lifting snow into small, frantic swirls. "Left him for dead?" Carson nodded. "They say he tried to stand his ground, burned his place to ash. Town says there wasn't nothing left but smoke and bones. Sheriff sent me to tell you, though truth be told, he didn't want you coming down. Said Red Hollow's seen enough killing." Jonas's jaw worked, a faint tremor under the beard. "You tell that sheriff," he said slowly, voice deep as the ground. "He ain't seen killing yet." Carson swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Boone. Your pa was a good man. Better than most." The snow began again, fine, white dust whispering through the pines. Jonas turned without another word and stepped back into the cabin. Inside, he stood still for a long while, eyes on the fire. The flames blurred and shifted, turning into memories. The smell of sawdust, his father's laugh, the sound of a hammer hitting wood as they built the barn together. He remembered the day he left, the argument, the shame. His father's words echoed now like prophecy. "There'll come a day you'll wish you'd stayed a decent man." He reached for the shelf above the hearth. Resting there beneath a layer of dust lay an old rifle, long and heavy, the barrel burnished by time. The stock bore the carved wolf's head he'd made as a young man, a symbol of strength, wild and loyal. He lifted it gently, running a hand down the barrel. Outside, Carson waited, unsure if he should stay or ride. The air felt thick, charged with something unspoken. He looked up at the ridge, where the clouds had begun to break, letting shafts of light fall on the snow. Then Jonas stepped out again, rifle slung across his back, eyes cold and clear. "You best ride, Carson," he said. "Ain't safe to follow where I'm headed." "Where's that?" the rider asked, though he already knew. Jonas looked toward the valley, where smoke from Red Hollow blurred the far horizon. "Home." Carson hesitated. "You can't bring your father back." Jonas's gaze didn't waver. "No, but I can send him company." He walked to his horse, a dark stallion with frost on its mane, and tightened the reins. The wolves began to howl somewhere higher on the ridge, a long, low chorus that rolled down the mountain like thunder. Jonas paused, listening. One of them appeared on a distant rise, watching him. He gave a slight nod, as if answering a summons. The rider watched in silence as Jonas swung into the saddle. The snow fell heavier now, cloaking man and beast in white. For a moment, he looked less like flesh and blood and more like something born from the mountain itself, a spirit of vengeance, shaped by the cold. "Boone," Carson called. "They'll hang you if you kill those men." Jonas turned his head, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "Then they'll have to find me first." He nudged his horse forward, and the sound of hooves sank into the snow. The wind rose behind him, carrying the echo of the wolves' song. Carson sat there long after he was gone, staring at the trail that disappeared into the storm. By the time the sun dipped low, Jonas Boone was halfway down the mountain, the world below stretching wide and empty. Each mile brought the memories closer, the smell of his father's pipe, the sound of laughter under the cottonwoods, the lessons about honor that now felt like echoes from another life. The lamps burned low in Red Hollow that night, their orange light wavering across windows streaked with dust. The town lay under a cold sky, stars dimmed by the smoke that curled from the saloon chimney. Inside, the Crowder gang was loud enough to wake the dead. Boots clattered, chairs scraped, and laughter, thick, mean laughter, rolled like thunder against the warped walls. Wade Crowder sat near the bar, one boot on the table, a bottle sweating in his hand. His men crowded around, drunk and red-eyed, their voices spilling over one another as the whiskey did the talking. "You should have seen that old bastard's face," Wade said, raising his glass. "Begged like a dog and still tried to lie to me. Said there wasn't nothing buried on his land." He chuckled, tipping the bottle back. "Well, there ain't now. Just ashes." The gang roared. One man smacked the table so hard the lantern flame jumped. "Heard he was still breathing when you rode off." Someone slurred. Wade smirked. "If he was, he ain't now. Fire takes care of most sins." He leaned forward, his grin twisting. "To Elias Boone, may his bones stay buried deep." The piano stumbled through a crooked tune, keys clinking like bones, while a saloon girl with tired eyes poured drinks she didn't want to pour. The air was thick with smoke and sweat. Outside, the wind pressed its cold fingers through the cracks in the wall, carrying the scent of dust and pine from the mountains. Across the street, Sheriff Cole Merritt sat in his dimly lit office, the sound of their laughter cutting through the night like knives. He sat at his desk, the lamplight trembling across a worn badge lying next to a half-empty glass. His hand hovered over it, then fell away. The law had been rotting in Red Hollow for years now. The Crowders had bought half the town. What they didn't buy, they scared. Merritt had learned to keep his head down, to survive on silence. But tonight the silence felt wrong. It carried something heavy beneath it, something building. He rubbed his temples and looked toward the black window where his reflection stared back. Behind that reflection, the street lay empty, the world waiting for something it couldn't name. The laughter in the saloon grew louder, desperate almost, as if trying to drown out a whisper no one wanted to hear. Then, somewhere outside, a sound broke the rhythm of the night, a slow, deliberate rhythm of hooves against wood and dirt. The laughter faltered. The piano keys missed a note. Merritt rose, his chair creaking. He stepped to the window, pulling back the curtain. Through the thin haze, he saw a figure riding down Main Street, the horse black as shadow, steam curling from its nostrils in the cold. The rider moved like a ghost, slow, sure, unstoppable. Jonas Boone rode under the dim light of the saloon sign, his hat low, his coat heavy with snow melt and dust. His face was half hidden, but his eyes caught the lantern glow, pale, steady, unreadable. The rifle across his back gleamed in the lamplight, and for an instant, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Inside, Wade Crowder froze mid-sentence. He set his bottle down, the clink of glass sharp in the silence. "Who the hell's that?" someone muttered. "Probably just another drifter," said another, though his voice shook. But when the saloon doors creaked open, the truth walked in with the cold. Jonas stepped through without a word, his boots thudding slow on the warped floorboards. The wind followed him, whispering through the room. The piano stopped. The girls backed away. Every eye turned toward the man, who looked carved from the mountain itself. He didn't speak, didn't even glance at them at first. He walked to the bar, the weight of him bending the silence. His coat brushed past tables. His presence filled the room until men forgot how to breathe. Wade forced a smirk, leaning back in his chair, though his hand twitched near his revolver. "You're a long way from home, stranger," he said. "Town's got rules about trouble." Jonas said nothing. He reached inside his coat, slow and deliberate. Several men drew their guns half an inch from their holsters. But Jonas didn't pull iron. Instead, he withdrew a folded, blood-stained paper. He walked to the saloon door, opened his knife, and with one solid motion, drove the blade through the paper into the wood. The sound cracked through the silence like gunfire. The paper fluttered once. The knife quivered, catching the light. A man near the door stepped forward, squinting. "It's a deed," he said softly. "Boone's farm deed." The color drained from Wade Crowder's face. "What the hell is this?" Jonas turned. His voice was deep, steady, like the earth itself speaking after a long sleep. "You left my father to die." The room tightened. No one moved. The fire snapped in the corner, spitting sparks. Wade tried to smile, but it came out wrong. That old fool. He had it coming. Man's gotta protect what's his. Jonas's eyes lifted, cold, unblinking. "Then I'll protect what's mine." He turned and walked out. The saloon stayed frozen until the sound of his boots vanished into the night. Then the noise came rushing back, chairs scraping, breath releasing, curses muttered under the breath. One of Wade's men bolted for the window, peering out. "He's gone," he said, headed toward the ridge road. Wade's jaw tightened. "No, he's still here." He slammed his bottle down. Boone's boy. The giant. Damn it all. He stood up, waving his arm. "Get some men. I want rifles at the barn, the bridge, and the water tower. Double the watch. No one sleeps tonight." The men scrambled, but fear hung over them thicker than whiskey. They'd heard stories, how Jonas Boone had once broken a man's arm in a single twist, how he'd vanished into the wild like a ghost. Some swore he'd gone mad. Others said the mountains had claimed him and turned him into something worse than man. Sheriff Merritt stepped into the street as the gang fanned out, the shadows cutting across the dirt. He watched Wade bark orders, his voice too loud, his confidence too thin. "You think more guns'll stop what's coming?" Merritt asked quietly. Wade spun. "You keep your nose out of this, Sheriff. You want to stay alive. You stay blind. Same as always." Merritt looked at him a long moment, then down at the blood-stained paper, still nailed to the door. "That's your warning," he said softly. "You boys lit a fire. You don't have the water to put out." He turned back toward his office, but not before he saw Wade's hand tremble as he reached for another drink. By midnight, the streets of Red Hollow were nearly empty. Only the wind moved, sliding between the buildings with a hollow moan. A sign creaked on rusty chains. The saloon door swayed, the knife glinting in the lantern glow. Inside, the remaining Crowder men sat uneasy, pistols in their laps. One of them, young, barely grown, stared at the door like it might open on its own. "You think he'll come back tonight?" he whispered. Wade stared into his glass. "He's already here," he said. "Somewhere out there, watching it." And he wasn't wrong. Beyond the town, on the dark ridge above the valley, Jonas Boone sat astride his horse, watching the faint yellow lights flicker below. The cold air bit at his face, but his breath came steady. In his mind, he saw his father's hands, rough and cracked, building fences, tilling soil. He saw the old man smile, the kind that had no malice left in it. And then he saw the flames. He reached back, running his fingers along the wolf carved into the rifle stock. The weapon felt alive under his hand. The first man fell at dawn. He was camped near the dry creek bed west of Red Hollow, his fire no bigger than a candle flame. The air was still, pale with the color of ash, when the crack of a rifle split it open. The bullet took him clean through the chest. He didn't even see from where it came. The coffee pot beside him shattered, spilling dark liquid over the dust as he slumped sideways, eyes wide at the emptiness above. From the ridge, Jonas Boone lowered his rifle, smoke curling from the barrel. His face was unreadable, the wind tugging at his coat. He waited, listening to the echo die among the rocks, then descended, each step deliberate. The man was young, barely 30, maybe, his hands rough from rope and reins. Jonas crouched beside him, pulling the man's revolver free, then laid it gently across his chest. "You had your choice," he murmured. "You made it." By mid-morning, the desert had gone quiet again. The vultures wheeled above. Jonas rode on. The next one he found 2 nights later, holed up in an old bar north of the canyon. Rain was coming down hard, rattling on the tin roof like musket fire. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the walls, carving the dark into brief moments of silver. Inside, the man was drinking, muttering to himself, pistol on the table, but his courage long gone. Jonas pushed the door open and stepped into the lantern light. The man froze, eyes wide. "Boone," he stammered, voice breaking. "Listen, I didn't. Wade made us." Jonas said nothing. He just looked at him, water running down his hat brim, dripping from his beard. The silence stretched until the man began to shake. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I swear it." Jonas reached for his revolver, but instead of drawing it, he set it down on the table between them. "Then prove it," he said softly. "Ride to the church in Red Hollow. Tell the sheriff what you did. Tell him the names." The man blinked, tears mixing with the rain. "You'll let me live? If you tell the truth." For a second, something like hope flickered across his face. But then his eyes darted to the side, toward the shotgun hanging by the door. It was only a twitch, a small betrayal of habit, but Jonas saw it. The man moved fast, desperate, snatching for the gun. Jonas moved faster. The revolver roared, the blast filling the barn with smoke and thunder. When the haze cleared, the man was on the ground, blood spreading through the straw. Jonas stood over him, chest rising and falling. "You had your chance," he said again, quieter this time. He holstered the weapon, turned, and stepped back into the rain. As he rode away, lightning flared across the sky, and for a heartbeat, the storm looked alive, like the mountains themselves were watching. He made camp in the high canyon that night. The rain softened to mist. He built a small fire beneath the overhang and sat in silence, the orange light flickering across his face. In the flames, memories flickered, his father's voice, the sound of a hammer driving nails into wood, the smell of fresh-cut hay. "Hold your breath steady," Elias had said once, crouched behind him at the fence line. Jonas was just a boy then, small hands clutching a rifle too big for his arms. "Don't shoot in anger. The land don't care for angry men." Jonas had nodded, his heart beating fast. He remembered how the barrel trembled, how his father's hand steadied it. The crack of that first shot had scared him, but his father only smiled. "You'll learn," he'd said. "Just promise me you'll use it to protect, not destroy." Jonas stared into the flames now, those words circling him like ghosts. Protect, not destroy. He closed his eyes, but behind them came another memory, the barn burning, his father's voice fading into the crackle of fire. The promise had died that night, buried under ash. By the time morning broke, the fire had gone out. He saddled his horse, cinched the straps tight, and rode toward the valley. Each man after that met him the same way, with trembling hands and too many words too late. He hunted them through sagebrush gullies and rocky trails, through ruins of mining shacks and crooked windmills. They ran, they begged, they lied. None repented, and every time his rifle spoke, it spoke the same word, judgment. The last of the brothers was the youngest, Caleb Crowder, barely 20, with his father's cruelty, but not his strength. Jonas found him alone on the trail, the sky black with an oncoming storm. Caleb tried to flee, kicking his horse hard, but the animal slipped in the mud and threw him. When Jonas dismounted, the boy was already scrambling to his knees, rain pouring down his face. "Please," Caleb gasped. "I didn't mean to hurt him. It was Wade. He said he'd kill me if I didn't help." Jonas's eyes softened, just barely. "You were there when they burned the cabin?" Caleb hesitated, guilt flashing through him. "I tried to stop it," he said. "I swear I did." Jonas stepped closer. "And did you stop it?" The boy's silence was answer enough. Lightning tore the sky apart, thunder chasing it. The rain came harder, drenching them both. Jonas lowered his rifle. "You're young," he said. Your hands ain't stained too deep yet. You can still change. Caleb blinked, confused. You're not gonna shoot me? I'm giving you what no one gave my father. Mercy. The boy stared, chest heaving, tears mixing with the rain. For a moment, something broke inside him, fear, maybe shame. Then his eyes flicked down, just slightly, toward the revolver lying in the mud near his boot. Jonas saw it happen. He almost didn't believe it. Almost. Don't, he said quietly. Caleb's hand darted anyway. The rifle fired once, the sound rolling through the canyon like the wrath of heaven itself. Caleb collapsed backward into the mud, the rain washing the blood away before it could darken the earth. Jonas stood still, the echo fading, his breath shaking for the first time that night. He'd wanted to spare one. He truly had. But mercy in this land had teeth. He looked down at the boy, water running off his hat brim. I tried, he whispered. When the storm broke at last, the air was clear again. The mountains loomed sharp and cold under a bruised sky. Jonas rode on, the thunder still rumbling behind him like something unfinished. The final trail led south, through the open plains, where the Crowder ranch sat like a scar against the land. The house was big, too big for men who'd earned it with blood. Lanterns glowed faintly in the windows. A few horses shifted in the corral, restless. Jonas stopped at the gate, staring at the house his father had once helped build when this land was still honest. His hand rested on the rifle. The wolf carved into its stock gleamed under the starlight, wet with rain. He dismounted, tied his horse to the fence, and walked the last stretch alone. The boards creaked under his boots. The front door was unlocked. Inside, Wade Crowder sat at a table, a bottle in one hand, pistol on the other. He didn't look surprised. I knew you'd come, Wade said, his voice low, roughened by whiskey. You think you're different from me, Boone? You killed just the same. You ain't a man, you're death in boots. Jonas stopped a few feet away. You're right, he said. You made me that. Wade laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. So what now? You pull that trigger and call it justice? You think your old man would be proud.